How you doing, guys? Big Mate Dan School here again today, back once again with another Conquest video for you. Today, I'm going to be taking a look through the pages of issue 44. First off, what do we get in the issue? Well, we get 2 paints. It's the lowest value issue we had for a while. We get, first of all, a refill of Lead Belcher, and also our first dry paint, Necron Compound, which is going to be really useful for all the metallic areas on the miniatures we've been painting so far. I say we, I mean you, no doubt, if you're following the painting guide in the magazine. Necron Compound is a really nice paint, to be fair. It's just gives you that edge highlight on, or the dry brush highlight, but effectively the same as an edge highlight on any metallic areas. And you'll see in the pages of the issue the effect it gives you. But at £2.75 a pot of paint, it's only a £5.50 value issue. The magazine itself costs almost £8, £7.99, and yeah, it's one of the lower value issues we've had. But you will remember that, you know, very recently we've had some really high value issues, in particular the one with the Platebearers crawler, and last week's issue even was, you saved about 35% on buying the terrain separately, possibly even 40% thinking about it. But anyway, yeah, so it's one of the lower value issues, but when we get high value issues, they tend to follow it with lower value issues to balance it out a bit, so that it's not, so they're not losing too much money, basically. Not that they're in a position where they're going to be losing money, but it just losing the profit they would have gained from selling the things separately. Okay, what do we get inside the issue? Well, first of all, on the front cover rather than inside, I always do that, we've got a painting with dry paints, Discover the Adeptus Mechanicus and Chronicles of Ultramar. So we're getting a bit of lore in there, we're getting painting guide as expected with any issue with paints in it, and Discover the Adeptus Mechanicus, so a little bit more in-depth touching on of one of the other Imperial armies of the Adeptus Mechanicus. So moving on to the first internal page, we get Adeptus Mechanicus, and it introduces us to a number of forge worlds. First being Mars, the foremost forge world of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The next one, Lucius, then Agrippina, you may remember from a few issues back. Styges 8, Greia, which I've never heard of before myself, so I'll touch on that one shortly. Riser, and Metallica. Yes, like the band, but with a different spelling, 1L. So Greia, I've never heard of before, or Greia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It resides in a network of space stations known as the Greying Crown. They are well known for their belief that warfare brings enlightenment, so gives me a sort of a feeling of warrior monks, perhaps, something like that. And obviously they're also known for building things, which the Mechanicus do in general. Talking about building things, why not talk about building the biggest things? Lucius. Lucius is a forge world that has its own Titan Legion, and they've also, in the past, from Forge World, the actual Games Workshop entity Forge World, rather than the Forge Worlds in the lore, they used to produce Lucius pattern Titans. I think you can get a Lucius pattern Warlord Titan head from Forge World at the minute, but there's no distinct Lucius pattern Titans, completely Lucius pattern. They were a bit more, or a lot more I should say, boxy than their Mars pattern equivalents. The Lucius pattern Warhound Titan, for example, I know they did a Warhound Titan, I think they did a Reaver Titan as well, but I know they did a Warhound Titan. It was really boxy, it was almost like you took like an Orc truck or something with a closed cap, and you put it on as a head of this Titan, and all the shoulders were all flat rather than curved like the Mars pattern Warhound Titan, and it's really distinct look to it. And I always wanted a Lucius pattern Warhound Titan. Now and again I see them on eBay, but I've never been tempted enough to pick one up. I'm just looking into one of my cabinets there, and there's some Lego in there. And I was thinking, you know what, I could build one with Lego if I really wanted to use one on the battlefield. I only really play close friends, so it'd be simple enough for me to say this counts as a Warhound Titan, but I'd need a lot of Lego for it. Anyway, moving on to the next page. So, Forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This page touches on the different forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus, funnily enough. The Centurio Ordinatus are responsible for the creation and maintenance of mighty war machines utilised by the armies of the Adeptus Mechanicus. So things including Titans. You can see on this page as well, there is a Warhound Titan there, that's the Mars pattern one. There's a couple there actually, there's two side by side. It's got like slightly curved edges on it, whereas the Lucius one has really like angled edges and flat surfaces on it. And then there's the Collegia Titanica, Titan Legions they are. The Auxilia Myrmidon, are a division of the Adeptus Mechanicus that specialises in siege warfare and the operation and maintenance of siege weapons. The Ordo Reductor, all about destroying the Imperium's many enemies. Legio Cybernetica are the robots, basically, of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the robot legions. And then there's the Legio Scutari, or the Legionis Scutari, sorry, which are your foot troops of the Adeptus Titanicus. Moving on to the next page, we've got a showcase here of miniatures. So this is the first time, well, really we've seen showcases of probably Ultramarine miniatures in the past and of Death Guard miniatures, but really this is the first time it's come out and done another faction showcase, I think. To be fair, it's not much of a showcase when you compare it to the showcases you get in the Codices and in various rulebooks and stuff in Warhammer 40,000. This isn't much of a showcase, even compared to like articles in White Dwarf. However, it is like the first showcase we've seen. We've got Belisarius Cole there. He's the Archmagus Dominus, or Archmagus Dominus of the Mechanicus, or an Archmagus Dominus, I should say. And then we've got the Scutarian Rust Stalkers. I love that kit myself. I love the look of that kit. I've actually picked one up for Kill Team. It was part of a box set. So I've picked that up, and I've not built it yet, but I will eventually get around to building it. Next to that, we've got the Cybernetica Data Smiths, who lead unit of robots, the robots of the Legio Cybernetica, funnily enough. Then we've got a Scutari Ranger. That's one of the guys from the Legionis Scutari. And then there's the Corpuscari Electro Priests, which are deadly fanatics. For me, the Corpuscari Electro Priests, from what I read about Greya, the Forge World there on the previous page, if I was doing a Greyan Forge World force, if I was putting one together, I'd put lots of Electro Priests in there, because I think they give you sort of a warrior monk sort of feel, like I hinted at previously, earlier on in the video. So moving on to the next page, we've got Imperial Knights. It touches on Imperial Knights and how a lot of knight houses are aligned to the Mechanicum. And then it talks about Scutari Battle Mana Pools, and then the Legio Cybernetica in further detail. So your Scutari Battle Mana Pools are your like your battalions, if you like. The battalions of the Legiones Scutari, basically. That's your Scutari Battle Mana Pools. So, moving on to the next page, Chronicles of Ultramar. It talks in a little bit more detail about the periods in history of Ultramar. So, for example, Guilliman's realm expands. The civil unrest of Nova Terra Interregnum has little effect on the Ultima Segmentum. While the Ultramarines wage war constantly during this period, Ultramar grows in strength and stature. Largely free of the grip of the ecclesiarchy, Guilliman's teachings of rational thought over superstition continue despite his absence. So Guilliman is already in stasis at this point in millennia 34 to 36. And his sons are, I don't want to say religiously, but they are strictly following the guidelines he laid down in the Codex Astartes. And that shows what a fine piece of text it is, and what a fine piece of work he did in creating it. Because if you follow it religiously, or strictly rather, if you follow it strictly to the letter, then you can basically continue to succeed time and again. There may be circumstances that mean you have to fall back, you have to regroup and stuff like that, but you, following Guilliman's teachings, you anybody, almost anybody, can succeed in the art of war. It's basically the art of war in the grim darkness of the far future. That's what it feels like to me anyway, the Codex Astartes, a lot of the time. And then we talk about the Age of Redemption in millennia 37 to 38. I'll just touch on one of the things in there. A new power rises. So this is an interesting part of this period. For the first time, the Ultramarines begin to fortify the eastern regions of their realm against the emerging forces of the upstart Tau Empire. So they're a very young race in terms of the age of the galaxy and the age of the other races in the galaxy. The Tau, this is. They're a very young race, only emerging really in the 37th, 38th millennium, but immediately they became a credible threat to the forces of the Imperium, to the Eldari, to any other forces operating in that area. And they went out to expand their empire, went out amongst the stars to expand their empire, much in the same way that at one stage in the Imperium's history, before the Imperium rather, humans went out to spread out across the galaxy and claim the stars for themselves. The Tower in that stage of development now, but they've got the Ultramarines and the forces of the Imperium on the eastern fringe of the galaxy to come up against, basically. I couldn't think of the right word there. Then the Chronicles of Ultramar continues on the next page. It's a lot more up to date here. It talks about the battle for Macragge, it talks about the return of Guilliman, the Great Rift, and all those sorts of things that we've touched on in previous issues, so there's no real need for me to talk about that. Demons of Nurgle, Plague Drones. So Plague Drones, you may remember, I don't know if I mentioned it actually on a video not too long ago, where we were talking about Beasts of Nurgle. Beasts of Nurgle, when they become less joyous, when they become bitter, when they realise nobody actually wants to play with them, they pupate. They basically go into a catalytic state, and they get surrounded by loads of rot flies in the Garden of Nurgle, and then what emerges from that pupation period, is that the right word? I think it is. I mean, it's been a while since I did GCSE biology, let's face it, but I'm thinking I'm using the right phrases there. So once they emerge from that pupation period, then they emerge as these bloat flies, these bloat drones, plague drones rather, and they're basically giant flies that a Platebearer can ride, that a champion of Nurgle can ride. And they've got these massive proboscis protruding from the faces. They've got these huge claws, they've got these buzzing wings that make this droning noise, and that's why they are known as plague drones, because it's just but really loud, really low sort of sound probably that they give off. And on the following page it talks about how beasts, again, pupate in the Garden of Nurgle and become these things. And the riders, the plague bearers that ride them, these high-ranking plague bearers, are always really arrogant of character and very petulant and arrogant, basically. And the worst of the worst in terms of the plague bearers. Onto the next page, we've got a short story here, The Droning Doom, and it gives you a brief feel, really, on the world of Espandor in the realm of Ultramar. It gives you a brief feeling of what it must be like to face these legions of plague drones. It talks at first about 7 plague drones emerging from the skies, coming down to attack this Ultramarine position. There's the Ultramarines of the Third Company and the Astra Militarum on the world. It talks about the acid rain that happens when Nurgle's there, when Nurgle's corrupted a planet, and the Space Marine is thinking to himself, oh, you know, I'm protected in my power armour, what must it be like for these Astra Militarum regiments? It must be awful for them. He can hear it hitting his armour and like sort of sizzling as it hits his armour. But yeah, so it gives you a really atmospheric feel of what it must be like to be on a world faced with the legions of Nurgle. And then on the next page we talk about the Imperial Fists, the Sons of Dawn, the protectors of terror. So, I am a fan of the Imperial Fist. I will be, when I eventually get around to painting all my Space Marine miniatures, we'll be painting them in the Imperial Fist colours. Some I'll take off to one side and do as Death Guard. Sorry, not Death Guard, Death Watch. But yeah, for the most part, I'll be painting the Space Marine miniatures getting the Conquest magazine as Imperial Fists. I've got a Space Marine Half of the Dark Imperium set that I started painting as Imperial Fist a long time ago, but now they are just sat in the cabinet midway through the process of being painted. I've got a new technique though with contrast paints involving a lot of nice dried yellow. So I'll be doing a video about that in the future, hopefully. But touching on the Imperial Fist, their homeworld is Terra. This is their official homeworld. Basically, the Primarch of the Imperial Fist, Rogel Dawn, came from a planet or a moon called Inuit, which it was like an ice world. But they're masters of siegecraft, the Imperial Fists, of both hunkering down behind high walls and breaking sieges, so being the attacker in the siege scenario. So they, when word spread of Horus's betrayal of the Emperor during the Horus Heresy, Rogel Dawn and the Imperial Fist were called back to Terra to basically fortify it, to fortify the Imperial Palace, to fortify the space around Terra, create blockades all throughout the Sol system, and to try and protect everybody inside the Sol system. They are, on the next page, it says the Defenders of Terra. They were given this title because basically they protect Terra. Not at all times though. They roam around on this massive, basically a moon with engines on it, almost a small moon with engines on it. Something the size of, I might get this wrong, but I'm going to say Enceladus, which I think is a moon of Saturn. Could be wrong there though. Correct me in the comments below if you're good on astronomy and everything. Yeah, astronomy, not astrology. If you're good on astronomy, correct me in the comments below. Yeah, so it's like a smallish moon that they move around space on, but it's got all these warp engines on it, so they can fly around and get all about. And that's where the chapter's base of operations really is. This space fortress called, I've forgotten its name. What's wrong with me? Phalanx. So on this giant space fortress called Phalanx, or the Phalanx, yeah, it roams around space. That's their base of operations. It's always manned by one of the companies at least. I think the latest company to man it were the third company, but I could be wrong there, which I think, in my head, the third company are the ones with the red trim on the shoulder pads. And I think they're the ones that man it currently. But it will go back to Terra and defend Terra in times of need as well. On to the painting guide. How to dry brush Necron Compound. It gives you a really nice, simple, but highly detailed, really. The amount of text that you see on these painting guides is sometimes quite surprising. Because I didn't know you could talk about dry brushing this much. But I talk about this magazine more than most other people do. Because I go off on tangents. Anyway, the dry brushing techniques it's showing you here, they're vital really for getting lots of miniatures painted, getting terrain painted, especially on vehicles and stuff like that. So the more dry paints you get, you know, and the more you do dry brushing, the more you actually get the technique down. It's a simple technique to start using, but to master it, to get it really nice, and you can make dry brushing look really neat once you're really good at it. I'm not the best at it at all, but you can make it look reasonably neat when you get really good at it. Hit it in key areas, like it's telling you here, to be fair, on the barricades of the thermic plasma regulators and the platform and stuff like that. So you're just hitting it in key areas to give you that wear and tear sort of feel on those rack-off flesh areas of the thermic plasma regulators. And then on the following page after that, it's how to paint scenery details. So it goes into more detail on how to paint the little dials, buttons on some of the keypads there, on the terrain, the red eye and the Mechanicus skull. Flicking over to the next page, another little red eye and the Mechanicus skull, pipe work, all that sort of thing. And then a Athonian camo shade, which I don't think we've used yet, have we? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we used it on some of the Death Guard miniatures, but we're using it now on the ammo crates that we got in the various terrain sets we've had. The containers, the armoured shipping containers, and also the battlefield accessories terrain sets we've had up to this point. And then on to armoured containers, more rules for the armoured containers. So this talks about the rules for using the storm bolters on the armoured containers. It also talks about cover when using the armoured containers. So basically, previously, if you were obscured by an armoured container, you would get cover from it. But now they're bringing in the idea that the game's more abstract than that. So even if most of your unit is hiding behind an armoured container, if one model's out, I can still shoot that unit and it doesn't get any cover save. So that's the idea there. That's the rules in 8th edition. And touching again on the storm bolters, the storm bolter is a weapon that's mounted on the armoured container, and any model can use that basically as long as it's got a ballistic skill. So all you have to do is have to be stood on top of the armoured container in order to use one of those 2 storm bolters. They have one on either end if you model them that way. So a unit like Gretchen for orcs could really utilise armoured containers well, because for orcs, Gretchen have high ballistic skill. They hit on a 4-up, whereas most orcs hit on a 5-up. But the trouble is that Gretchen's guns are short range pistol weapons, and they're not powerful at all. They're like strength 3. So a storm bolter with a 24-inch range rather than a 12-inch range, and it's rapid fire 2 as well. So within that 12 inches, you get to shoot twice with it. It's if there's an armoured container that's where an objective is on a battlefield, then Gretchen can really benefit from using the storm bolters on that rather than their normal weapons. Onto the following page, like I said, the rules about line of sight and cover, and also standing on the terrain. It goes into more detail here with more, you'll see behind me, with more examples of cover and using the storm bolters on there. I keep just losing track of what I'm thinking here. So, taking the tech dumps is the mission briefing here. Kalon's many factories are brimming with weapons, ammunition, fuel supplies and other valuable technology. Much of this equipment has been removed by evacuating Imperial workers, but many containers of valuable equipment lie strewn across the city, spilled from the torn hulls of downed transports or left behind during the attack. Just to set the scene there, that gives you a brief idea of what's going to happen in this battle. The Death Guard are trying to obtain all this Imperial technology that's been left behind and utilise it into their nefarious means. Whereas the Space Marines have got to try and get to those containers before the Death Guard to make sure they can't utilise it to their nefarious means. So this battle is all about the containers. I'd have my other terrain on the battlefield as well, but the containers are 3 objectives in this battle basically. The armies involved are 12 Poxwalkers, 5 Plague Marines, Tainted Cohort, Malignant Plague Caster, Noxious Blightbringer, and that's it for the Death Guard. And then the Space Marines have 5 Reavers, 5 Intercessors, 3 Hellblasters, 2 Inceptors and a Primaris Librarian. Deployment zones, both players have a deployment zone of 6 inches at either end of the battlefield in this one. Players then alternate deploying their units, beginning with the players chosen to deploy first. After all units have been deployed, the player who finishes setting up their army first can choose to take the first or second turn. Eliminate the enemy warlord. Victory conditions, this is. Eliminate the enemy warlord, 1 victory point. First player to eliminate an enemy unit, 1 victory point. Each objective held at the end of the game, so that's each of the containers, 1 victory point. To hold an objective, you must have more models than the enemy within 3 inches of it at the end of the game. The game lasts 5 battle rounds. So you could easily draw this. So if you did find you kept drawing this mission and you wanted to change it slightly, you could make the objectives of different value. Something like, so the idea behind it is that one of the containers has something more valuable than the other containers in it. So you give that a victory point of 2 rather than 1. Or you could just, each time, whenever a container is captured at the end of a battle, whichever side controls it rolls a dice, they get that number of victory points instead. Just to try and decrease the possibility of a draw being fought out there. And then, onto the back page of this issue. What have we got in next week's issue? We're getting the Scouts next week. I've remembered that one from the previous issue. Yeah, I expressed last week that I'm not a massive fan of the scout models. Well, the models are alright, to be fair. It's the heads I don't like. I can just swap them. I've got plenty of models set to one side. I've got Tempestus Scions, which I'm thinking about swapping the heads on them with. Stuff like your Skitarii. There's a helmeted head in there, which could work quite well. So I've got a fair few options. Some people like the scouts and, you know, don't mind the heads on them. That's personal preference at the end of the day. And after that, the following week, we are getting some Death Guard reinforcements. We are getting the big floaty bloat drone, I want to say, from the Dark Imperium box set, as well as 4 Plague Marines and 1 Lord of Contagion. So that's more models from the Dark Imperium box set. It's a really nice little selection of models as well, in my opinion. We can play 10 Plague Marines we'll have now once we've got all these models. So it's looking good for the Death Guard in issue 46. I'll come back next week with more news and more thoughts about the Scouts. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the battlefield.